Jacqueline Kennedy never wrote a memoir, but now more than 8 hours of a recorded interview that she did nearly 6 months after her husband was assassinated gives the world an entirely new perspective on the former First Lady. In these interviews, she speaks candidly about her husband, the president, and his private thoughts on some of the powerful historical figures of the time. It was only months after her husband's assassination when a 34-year-old widow sat down to record more than 8 hours of recollections about her husband and his most private thoughts, while they were still fresh, even raw. JFK and his brother Bobby on Lyndon Johnson, the new president.
Bobby told me this later, and I know Jack said it to me sometimes. He said, "Oh God, can you ever imagine what would happen to the country if Lyndon was president?" So many times he'd say it, or if there was ever a problem.
On the day her husband was buried, the former First Lady had written to thank LBJ for all his kindness, calling him, quote, Jack's right arm. And more than that, we were friends, all four of us. Almost a half-century later, we hear a different view, perhaps colored by Bobby Kennedy's resentments after the assassination, and her annoyance after this call from Johnson a month after her husband's death, 2 days before Christmas.
I hope that you're doing all right.
Oh, I'm doing fine, thank you.
You know how much we love you. You have a good Christmas, dear.
Thank you, the same to you.
Good night.
Hours later, Jackie learned LBJ was in fact showing off for a room full of reporters. Just as stunning are criticisms of the leader of the civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but they need to be understood in context. At the time, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover was trying to incite divisions between the Kennedys and Dr. King by telling Bobby Kennedy that Dr. King was overheard on FBI wiretaps making crude comments about Jackie Kennedy kissing her husband's coffin on the day of Jack's funeral. The tapes were supposed to be locked in a vault for a century, but Caroline Kennedy decided to release them now, all 8.5 hours, uncensored, because she felt you don't change someone else's oral history. She also explained it isn't surprising her mother would have, at the time, made some statements she might have changed later. As Caroline told Parade, when she first read the transcript shortly after her mother died, they reminded her that her mother felt what made historical figures human was what made them more interesting. And indeed, emerging from this oral history is a very different Jacqueline Kennedy. Not the long familiar public figure whose whispery voice guided us through the White House.
It just seemed to me such a shame when we came here to find hardly anything of the past in the house.
Or the fashion icon whom the president joked he accompanied to Paris.
I am the man who accompanied Jacqueline Kennedy to Paris, and I've enjoyed it.
This Jacqueline Kennedy is far more complex, with a keen eye for the characters around her husband, and a feel for diplomacy and politics.
I mean, in politics, things do change so quickly, and Jack would never, he'd often say that, never get in anything so deep that you've lost all chance of conciliation.